Right, everyone, get this party started because there's people milling in through the door, and before they run away screaming, we might as well get going. So, welcome everyone to sort of the inaugural MonoGame Foundation open hours. Only because Microsoft did it first, and we had to come. But hey ho! So, to get everyone started, then you can hear me. Oh, this is. Yes, Discord is broken. Oh, okay, I shall talk to myself for 10 minutes. Right, okay, sorry. Hopefully everyone can hear me this time. Oh, right, okay, so let's get started with this inaugural MonoGame Foundation open hours session. Because of our friends at Microsoft who paved the way in doing these kind of sessions, so we had to follow suit, being a proud member of the open source community. And if I can invite my fellow foundationers to the stage to sort of introduce themselves. I'm Simon Darkside Jackson, I'm the Foundation's Secretary and Chief Note Taker and Documenter. Anyone else want to jump in?
I'm Dean Ellis. I'm the current president of the MonoGame Foundation. I've been working on MonoGame for like, 10, 14 years now.
Hey everybody, this is Tom. I've been working on MonoGame since I don't know, 2012 or so, I guess is when I started contributing originally. And yeah, I'm handling banking and US tax matters and stuff like that here in US for the foundation.
Hello, I am Thomas Rothenberger, and I've been MonoGame contributor for also for the past 10 years also. And I'm a regular foundation member with no specific roles.
Yep. Yep, so that's the main core of the team. One of our team, Dominic, is currently flying back from Australia. So he couldn't be on time, and hopefully Harry should also be in the chat answering questions. So got pretty much all of the foundation recognised and represented here. Tom's fantastic beard. Ian's not showing because he has a beard. So
thanks.
But let's kick this off. So, as this sort of the first session, we set aside some kind of prime things we want to get through. Just as a favourable session, we're not going to do any heavy presentations now, apart from just a state of the play of where we are, and then effectively open the floor to you, our current MonoGame community. So we're going to go in quick intro to open hours, what the aim of these sessions are, what we're going to do, a quick talk about what bounties we've got available now, which ones we've completed since we started the foundation, and what our hopes are for the future there. A quick check on what we're doing about donations and the great support that we're getting from the community, and then opening the floor to everyone. So the primary focus of these open hours is to give you, the community, and more direct access to us as the foundation. We've been working very hard since the last year when we've been pulling everything up, and everyone seems to really accept it and been energized by the activity coming from the foundation. Been hitting back hard. We've been trying to accelerate the framework, starting up paid work to try and do parts where we, the team, simply haven't got the time to focus on nitty-gritty parts and what they're doing. So we're encouraging the community to help us out and really engage with the foundation, while still being an open source framework and still opening up to free competition from everyone, as this is still the biggest open source game framework out there, with so many titles and things being launched on it. But obviously, we always want to do more. We have limited time. All the foundation members, we give our time freely to the foundation to jump in, but we're always there to try to do more. We want to get in there. We want to get frameworks done. We want to get the games built with it. And we want to ensure that we're addressing any concerns or aspirations that the community has around what is MonoGame and what is its future. So through open hours, really, we're just going to try and give up a monthly meeting, sort of 1 week after we've had our foundation meeting, when we've just gone through the tales of what's going on in the month and plans and things, and then try to voice them to you, the community, and give you a chance to comment and add feedback to what the direction is of MonoGame. So anyway, I've talked enough. I'm going to hand over to a couple of our board members now to talk about bounties. So,
well, I guess before we actually do that, Simon, I guess the main news, which Tom just landed on us about 5 minutes ago,
this is true,
was that the foundation has officially got its non-profit status in the US now. So we are officially a non-profit. And that came through about 25 minutes ago, Tom?
Yep, just walked into the office, got the mail, and saw that we got an official nonprofit status. So we're officially nonprofit in the US. That's as of last year. So any donations over the last year are tax deductible at this point, which is good for a lot of reasons. It's good for people that donate. It's good for us as a foundation. The money goes back into the product and doesn't go into taxes and things like that. So we hope that it'll help boost our donations, make it more attractive for people to donate, and just make it feel more secure, because being a foundation and being a nonprofit, we have certain requirements that we have to meet, so you can be sure that the money that's being put towards this is being put towards good use. It is a charity now. It is not just a for-profit company. So I think that's great. But yeah, it just happened to happen today as I walked in. So it's just coincidence that it happened the same day we're doing these open hours. So that's fantastic.
So if I get this right, so if you're a resident of the US and you donate to MonoGame, you can then deduct the amount of that donation from your taxes when you file your tax return at the end of the year, right?
Yes,
How
that's
that
my
works?
general understanding. I'm not a tax guy either, so I can't tell you for sure the details of what you can and can't do. But you can say that when you do your taxes, you can say like, "Hey, I donated this amount of money to this charity," and that can come off your taxes to a certain extent. I don't know the full details of it, but yes. We'll be updating the website here in the next, day or so to note that, so that I think it just makes it better for people that are donating to feel like, oh, I'm donating to something that's actually a charity. And when you do that, you have backups. To one of the things you have to do once you officially file some charities, they ask you, well, what happens to the money? Let's say the foundation folds or closes shop. What happens to that money at that point? We've dedicated that money back to the .NET Foundation and to, what was the other foundation we dedicated to? It was like a Games for Children in Hospitals Foundation that money goes to if anything ever happens to the MonoGame Foundation. So, you can feel confident that the money is being spent well and specifically on MonoGame, and if not, it's going to go to good use.
Cool. Excellent. We have just had a question about whether EU members can donate it from their taxes, and the honest truth is, I don't know.
Yep.
We'd have to talk to a lawyer probably about that.
And it might be worth doing that just so that we can tell people up front, like, this is what you can expect. But yeah, I have no clue how that works. It could be that we have to file separately in some different way, in the EU to make that work. So that's something we can investigate.
Absolutely.
Okay, and let's move on. And in going into a nice rundown of our current bounties, so I pass the floor back to Tom and Dean, and plus, if you want to walk through something, a lot of work has gone into doing major work. Not all of it is evident in the actual public repo for use, because they're all stepping stones to make things work. So, guys, if you want to talk about some of the big bounties that we've actually managed to complete now.
Tomas, you want to do that, or do you want me to take it?
Oh yes, no, I can. So yeah, so the big work that has been done in the shadow, let's say, is mostly about two things. The first is currently ongoing, is moving the console runtime to native AOT. So for people who are not familiar with this, the general .NET runtime doesn't exist on consoles. So when you have to run a C# application on console, you can't. As is, you can't. And so for a long time, what's been done is that Tom has been maintaining a tool that is called Brut. And this tool is basically a C++ transpiler. And it takes the compiled C# and it decompiles it into C++, and then you have to build a C++ project to make it run on consoles, and it plugs everything with a garbage collector and a runtime. So this was the runtime that has been maintained and used for something like maybe the past 10 years by Tom and almost Tom alone. And it's a pretty huge work because if you can imagine, it's the whole .NET runtime. So it making .NET applications running on an environment that is not made for so. And this tool for a long time has been maintained solely by Tom. And it's a pretty big chunk, and it had quite some technical depth in the end because it was based on .NET 4, and upgrading it to a modern standard, to .NET 8 or even 9, it's a pretty big work, which is basically rewriting the whole tool. So if you can imagine something like a 10-year-old code base being rewritten, it's quite a big of work. And so it's been kind of dragging things down because it imposed to us a lot of limitations, like the infamous C#5 limitation in the code. And when you were running, and if you're willing to port a game to consoles, you had to abide to these limitations. So it was a bit constraining. And luckily lately, there has been something more official in the name of native AOT. It's a new runtime from maintained and by Microsoft, and it is open source. And it is part of the official .NET runtime, and it has been ported to console mostly by the FNA team, just to give credits. And the MonoGame Foundation is joining also the effort to maintaining the console ports of native AOT in the future, if need be. And we had to switch everything to this technology because it is not the same kind of structure of how things had to work. So we had to reshape things. And for instance, Tom is currently rewriting each and every console version of MonoGame to fit into this new runtime. So he already finished Nintendo Switch. We already have Xbox running from another Bounty. And Tom is currently working on PlayStation 4 and 5 to work on native AOT. And once everything has been migrated to native AOT, we are going to be able to retire Brut and completely lift every kind of limitation in regard to C# version and so on. So it's quite a big news because we are not going to have any more conversations on GitHub on issues and so on, like, sorry, we can't accept this and stuff like this. So we are not going to be limited by this anymore, and we are going to be able to iterate and move faster on everything that is going to be related to consoles. There's going to be less stuff like that. And another big bounty. So this bounty is currently in progress, and it's being made by Tom. Another big bounty that has been completed and that was pretty much needed is the support for DirectX 12. So the Xbox version of MonoGame used to be based on DirectX 11, except that Microsoft kind of retired DirectX 11 on consoles, not on PC. So it's not retired on PC. So just don't get me wrong on that subject. And so we had a bounty that has been made by a community member in the name of Togi, and he completely implemented the DirectX 12 backend for the Xbox. And it turns out that it's pretty much the same thing for PC. So he also made everything running for PC. So everything that he made in this bounty is going to be made public. So we are going to have a new backend in the name of maybe Windows DirectX 12, something like this. And it's going to be in the future the main default Windows backend. And ultimately, if things are stable, we are going to retire the existing Windows DX, which is based on DirectX 10. And so that's pretty good news, because that means that we have a modern backend running, which is pretty cool. And it's quite a big work that has been done. Another big work that has been done and is moving to what we call a native backend. So this is a work that Tom has been doing too. So every platform code. So if you look at the code base of MonoGame, there is mostly C# code. So everything is a bit separated. I mean, there is the DistocGL backend, which is OpenGL with OpenIL for the sound. And we have Windows DX, which is using SharpDX, which is a C# wrapper for DirectX, and Xaudio for the audio. And everything is pretty much made in C# and in the public repository as is. And so there is a very tight connection between all the API of MonoGame and every platform code, which means that whenever we have to change something on the public API, it pretty much affects everything down the line. So the idea was to separate platform code from public API, and also to turn it into a native library so that it fits better into integrating new platforms such as consoles and so on, which has basically only native stuff. And the idea is to have MonoGame being a C# .NET assembly, and just using a native DLL that you can swap and just interchange with every backend. So like having just, for instance, a DirectX 12 DLL of the platform and just swapping it for another one, like a Vulkan backend, and it just works. So the idea is this, and this change is pretty big because it's better for maintainability, for adding new platform and so on, and it's also better for changing the public API, which means that we hope that there are going to be less friction in the future for changing the public API, and it's just going to be changing the, hopefully, C# side of things. So we are going to be able to iterate faster, to allow to add new features and so on, and also maybe more easily breaking changes in the future on other branches of MonoGame. And so this work has been done by Tom also. And when doing this, he salvaged a Vulkan version of MonoGame that he did back for another version of MonoGame privately, which used to be private. And so we have, luckily, a new backend, which is Desktop VK, which is currently merged, and inside the current version of MonoGame, it is not currently publicly distributed because there is still a few glitches here and there. But we have this new Vulkan backend ready and made by Tom. So which means that we have two new backend which are completed, finished, and that pretty much just need to be packaged nicely and published, which are DirectX 12 and Vulkan. And this is going to be moving forward the future of MonoGame, I guess, because we are also expecting at some point to move the mobile versions of MonoGame to Vulkan, or maybe we are going to stay on OpenGL. It really depends on how things are going to work. And so that's pretty much for the biggest of the bounty that has been done, it's a pretty big deal because this is basically the pavement for everything's going to come. And once these are going to be fully completed and published, we are going to be able to make much more bounties and working much more on precise project features and so on. Other kind of bounty that has been made is the packaging of some dependencies like FFmpeg and ffprop in an attempt to move away from, we have currently in the code base of MonoGame a dependency toward a lot of different kind of libraries, which are typically binaries that we picked somewhere, which are pre-built and so on. And there is a lot of inertia when we need to update one of these libraries because we have to rebuild it, to upload it, to make pull requests and so on. So the idea is to clean things up, to abandon the submodule of dependencies and to package each dependencies into an independent repository, self-hosted by the MonoGame Foundation and self-building. So for instance, there is SDL2, FFmpeg, ffprop, and other kind of dependencies. They are all automatically built now by directly on GitHub, and they are just linked as indirect references as nuggets and so on. So it's much better for maintainability when we need to upgrade libraries. For instance, when we need to upgrade SDL, we just have to bump the code source versions and it's going to build and distribute a nugget package and self-build itself. And the advantage also is that we know that we built it ourselves. So there is no malware in it and so on. It's not a DLL that you grabbed anywhere on the internet. So it's safer from a security perspective. And another bounty that has been made is upgrading MonoGame to Basis Universal for cross-platform texture compression, because there used to be problem for running some image compression on some platforms like macOS and Linux. So we incentivize this with a bounty to use another tool which has been completed. And so now there is supposedly less problems on running MonoGame on Mac and on Linux, and especially Mac. Everything is not yet plugged, but once everything is going to be plugged in terms of dependency, we hope that maybe the next release of MonoGame or the next one is going to solve pretty much all the problems there is of running the pipeline, content manager, and so on Mac and Linux, hopefully. And that's pretty much it. And there is still ongoing bounties about making better tutorials and better onboarding for MonoGame. And that's pretty much it, I guess, for current bounties, which I guess.
Thanks for that, Thomas.
Yeah,
just a heads up for, I'm just going to, sorry, Simon, the texture compression bounty, just so people know, there are 2 outstanding PRs that we're waiting for in the main repo. And once they're in, we'll probably be able to start going for the next release, actually. So that should help with Mac and Linux people a lot, if all goes well.
One of the comments that has been put in the chat is that if you want to access the chat in Discord while we're in this big streaming environment, the top right hand corner there's a nice little chat button, and that'll open up the chat window. When we get to the Q&A section, if people can post their questions first in chat, and then we'll invite them on the stage to voice them if they wish, or they can just ask questions in the chat, and the team are all on hand to be able to answer them. Thomas had appeared. Is he still there? Oh, it looks like he's gone off again. He appeared briefly in his repo trading window and he's disappeared. So if you want to know more details about the bounties and what kind of futures and things are planned out, make sure you check out the roadmap page. The link is on the screen there, where we're trying to keep that up to date with everything futuristic as it comes. One of the things I usually state is the case of with MonoGame, the way everything's set out and the whole XNA API is that it's the whole calm swan serenely going across the lake. we're under the water, the fetus basically rapidly moving and all changing. So try to keep me. Now, one of the things we like to try and encourage, or at least help, because we're all here trying to build a game framework. There are people building games and putting them and getting them out there and earning revenues and things. And we can't really ask to not forget MonoGame is here to help you be successful. Also, if you can be there to help MonoGame. So on the MonoGame main page, there's a donate page, and we're again open to all kind of feedback and help in the case of how you can also help MonoGame in the way that MonoGame can help you be successful. We constantly talk with different vendor partners about how we can work with them. Microsoft have even joined the call here today from their game dev open sessions, and we're also working on them to try and get MonoGame published back through the indie platforms and seeing what we can do to help you be successful. So again, this is a partnership. So we're here helping you to build your games and be successful. We ask if you think of MonoGame as well, whether it's through code, through funds, through promotion, connections, or even sharing out titles. So Tomas, in the last few months, their studio released one of their games written in MonoGame, and all the source for that is now online. It's all funny running. You can build it. You can learn from how actual studios are building with it, and that's an ongoing discussion. So we're always working with partners to see what other titles and solutions we can bring to you to help you understand how games are made in the real, published in the real, and give you the source so they can do the same themselves. To learn from Mind, you can't go and republish them. Copy assets. They are an educational license. So please keep that there. But if you can, I'd say visit the donation page. Maybe become a patron of MonoGame, where one of the things we're doing with the patron site as well is we're looking at ways to give more rewards or more things back, whether or not it's actually merch or with badges. We're looking at the digital rewards we can reward back, but a lot of people are just happy to continue to evolve and contribute to keep the dream alive. But we're working hard, and we've got other partners also supporting us, so long may it continue. So we now enter Twilight Hours, the second half of our session now. So this is where we're opening the floor to you. So if you have a question and something you want to ask of the MonoGame team, or even whether it's a project question or whether it's to do with leasing a project or build or queries, then if anyone wants to come forward, then please raise your hand and or also post a question into chat and we can bring you to the stage. So I don't know if you want to talk about some of the challenges you've had in trying to get merch for our community, because that's been a very fraught discussion with.
I was actually just wondering, because I was just reading through the board minutes, and I don't think, because I don't know if we mentioned that we've got 2 part-time members now. Did that ever get into the minutes?
Ever fit. Oh, want to talk to that, Dindy?
Yeah. Well, we took the decision to do a very brief experiment. Okay, and this was mostly driven by the back end work that Tom's been doing, in that we've allocated some funds to sort of like retain Tom and Dominic on a part-time basis. Tom's principal focus is going to be working on the native backend and the console ports. And Dominic is dealing with community engagement and PRs and various other bits and pieces. So the idea being that hopefully we can use some of the money that we've got to kind of like speed things up a bit. Because we obviously found, obviously a lot of us are given our time, it's spare time and life gets in the way, so it could be months between me having time to do some work on a game and getting back to it. That's why some PRs stay open for so long, I guess. But hopefully this kind of new little experiment will work. We're going to give it like 3 months, I think we said, and we're going to see how it pans out and see what comes of it. Hopefully the community will notice the difference. Anything you want to add to that, Tom?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this allows me to be able to spend some actual time on the console stuff beyond just, when we're porting things. Our studio, the reason the MonoGame console stuff exists was, just our desire to get console compatibility there for our own projects. But also, the original version that exists was because XNA was very popular. There were a lot of games on Xbox 360 that were XNA. There were a lot of indie titles. And Sony wanted some of those indie titles on PS4. So they came to us and say, like, hey, can we get, MonoGame, which was the only thing available that would give you XNA compatibility at all on other platforms. And they funded the initial projects to get, Towerfall on PS4. And that was how it all started. From there, we kept pushing to get on other consoles and more platforms, and other games opened the door for us. Axiom Verge, Celeste, Stardew Valley opened doors at Nintendo. Those things allowed us to get to those platforms, and those projects were the ones that originally funded the work on getting MonoGame on consoles. But since then, there hasn't been a lot. There's been a lot of, because of our work here where we do game porting, we have to go where the industry goes, and we've been getting a lot of Unity and Unreal port work, and less MonoGame XNA stuff. We still get some, but not as much as we get on Unity and everything else. So our time's more focused on other platforms, unfortunately. So at the day job, that's where I'm focused. I still want to get more MonoGame on consoles and keep that process smooth. So having some of the foundation pay for some of my time, that helps me be able to focus on that and get those things done without having to worry about I also have to eat situation. So that's been positive, I think. We'll see. The foundation's the board's gonna re-evaluate things once we get past these first 3 months and see, do we continue it or not. We want to make sure that it's something that is maintainable. At the moment, with the donations that we get, it is for the next couple years, at least. But we're hoping to grow our donations to see more progress there. We're aware of that. We're now a charity, so we actually have to spend time on fundraising. But end of the day, we feel like the important thing is if we provide good console support and good cross-platform support, there'll be some percentage of games that are done under MonoGame that, become popular. And when those games become popular, it'll flock more developers towards MonoGame. So we're hoping that that's how that works, and that'll increase the donations, which will allow us to spend more time on these platforms and add more functionality. So that's what we're hoping for. I think that this is the first step, having some actual paid time to work on it, which is something we've been wanting for a long time. It's
Yeah.
only been possible now because of the really great donation from Relogic that started everything off, kind of revived everything after being in a kind of not dormant, but kind of like just a zombie mode of like, we're just doing stuff, but it wasn't really, we had goals, but everybody was too busy to focus on them. This kind of all focused everybody back into doing MonoGame and making it successful and pushed us forward. So I think that we're in a good spot right now. I'm excited about the next couple of years here about how things go. And really, the sky's the limit here. I still believe in the core of XNA and the magic that you had when you first worked with it, how simple it was to get something running. And then once you were able to just hit one button and deploy it to a console and see it running on a console, or deploy it to a phone and see it running on a phone, I still think there's some magic there that a lot of people don't experience, that is pretty neat, and I think that we could, as long as we keep things smooth, we can continue to do that. And I'd like to also take it beyond the 2D aspect of it. MonoGame's always looked at as a 2D engine. We want to try to push this towards like, no, it's actually a 3D engine. It's just 3D is a much harder thing to tackle. So this
Yeah.
is where the bounties around tutorials and samples take over to kind of help fill those gaps and make it easier for people to be able to do that, and then past that into the future is like, where do we take the API moving forward so we can take advantage of new concepts in video games beyond the XNA4 API, but that's still, a ways out.
Yeah. For those people who are worried about the financing of this, don't worry. Tom and Dom are not being paid market rates
Yeah, no,
at the moment.
not.
Okay.
I'm not quitting my day job.
Yeah. So
And
it's
yeah.
literally just like a kind of a small retainer,
Yeah.
just to help
And
motivate things.
I believe that something important to note is that since the foundation is a non-profit, board members are not allowed to make a profit of it. So basically, everyone who takes on a bounty or on a job under the foundation is going to be underpaid in regard to US standards, just to be fair and square with
Yeah.
regard to the non-profit status.
Yeah, we always try. I mean, we've had trouble with that because there have been bounties that we put out there and had no one interested until we raised it a little bit. And that's going to happen. The public, they're going to, that's going to happen. Internally, we try to be as conservative as possible with that stuff because we don't want to drain the accounts and have nothing to fall back on. So we're trying to be aggressive, but at the same time, not be silly with the money spent. And now that we're a nonprofit, it makes it easier, so we can keep all that money and not have to waste it on taxes and stuff. So that helps. But yeah, we're not being paid, anything crazy. It's just enough to say it's worth spending my time on this and be able to focus on it without having to worry about having distractions, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, what we get right now, the monthly income that we get from Patreon and Relogic is not something that keeps us can keep this afloat forever. We do need to see increases in donations, but it's enough that we feel confident that this could work. This is why we're going to reevaluate in 3 months. If we feel like we've made good progress and it's helped our ability to reach milestones and push the framework forward, then we're going to continue with it and maybe even double down. So it just depends on how things shake out over the next couple months.
Okay, cool. Well, we've got some questions coming in. Hopefully Simon's keeping an eye on that. And the first one's actually for Simon, because it's about documentation, isn't it?
Wrote that down. I believe you were supposed to help me with the documentation.
Yeah, well, I got kind of sidetracked with Mac support and fixing bugs. So sorry about that.
Well, as hopefully everyone's noticed now, we have had a massive push in the last 6 months to rapidly upscale our documentation. So we had a project where we migrated all the XNA style documentation for all the different components of what makes XNA or MonoGame, and also a lot of sites of how-to material for getting jobs done and how to work out specific things. The job doesn't stop there because there were gaps in the documentation. Some things didn't quite work or translate right, so that process is ongoing. I'm working on a series on working with cameras, both a 2D and also predominantly a 3D perspective. There were some good samples, but they didn't really meet the mark for trying to describe, especially to a beginner, how cameras work in 3D, which are quite fundamental and easy to understand. And all of this is ongoing, but again, this is not to stop the community themselves offering up content or tutorials or quests for specific areas where they need more help or a question that went unanswered. We also keep an eye on Discord, so where questions keep popping up, and the moderators do a great job of answering those, but they feed back to us of these, like the top questions have been answered, so maybe we should get some documentation styles and get those doing. We keep investing in our samples, so the latest ones to got introduced was the ship game, which is a fully 3D descent clone. It is a bit aging, but I believe Tom has got a passion for refreshing that sample and making it more modernized. Now, I believe, Tom, that's going to be the target of one of our DX12 samples. Revitalized ship game sample.
Yeah, I mean, that was something we talked about, Yeah, I have some passion over that. It's funny, back before Descent originally shipped, if anybody's aware of Descent, um, we were, myself and a couple people were working on a project that was very, very, very similar to Descent. And we had this wireframe camera flying through, tunnels and stuff, and we thought it was really cool. And we were working on trying to colorize it and texture map it. This is back in, when your computer was a 386, 486. It was like really, really old. And we had something cool going. And then one day I logged into a BBS, because this is again before the internet, and I downloaded this shareware thing called Descent, and we played it and was like, oh my god, this is almost exactly what we were thinking of doing. And it sucks, that we stopped. We should have stopped. That's the worst mistake you can make is, oh, somebody else did this, let's stop doing this. But it was exactly what we're looking at doing. So I have some passion for that game because it sucked up a bunch of time. If anybody ever played Descent, on LAN or online, it was a really fun game back then. And I think that, doing a good version of it would be a nice starting point for showing 3D and effects and how you can do stuff. It's just it's very easy to make a 2D engine, and it's very straightforward to start, and it doesn't require a lot to do pretty advanced features. It's when you get to 3D, it becomes a lot more complicated, and that's where it's a question of like how much do we have to put in? How can we keep the sample, simple and understandable without having a ton of extra code? But still make it look attractive. So it's a balance there. So we're trying to figure out what the right approach is there, and I have some ideas, but nothing concrete. But again, right now the priority is getting the console builds up to date. Moving to the new native AOT backend, and improving the console support, because that really does help all our devs that are publishing on console.
I mean, the fuel cell is probably one of the most well documented 3D samples, but it's not any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I even use that as a sample in the other projects. Fibrosis to show movement by breathing, but samples and education, it is a big thing for us. Our aspiration is to have a university approach where you need to come in, you want to learn MonoGame, there'll be an education path or track get you there. But it's a lot of work to get done, and again, we're only part-time doing. Welcome anyone's help in supporting this. We do have 2 open bounties which are currently being worked on by 2 members of the community. They're both in good advanced stages. I believe one is currently, the author is actually put on GitHub for people to comment on while they're finishing building it. But again, even with our bounty holders and community doing things, life gets in the way. So, but we are always chasing. But again, we have a full catalogue of future bounties to go on those once we get past these hurdles. Or if it's a case of people want to see more advanced tutorials sooner before seeing anyone, then we welcome feedback. No, we're always questioning in the foundation, are we doing the right thing? We check all the channels, we check the chats, we check the issue logs. The community site, unfortunately, when it was on operation, it's a shame we had to not shut it down, but we had to suspend it because it simply got inundated with spam. We were just talking this week potentially about starting that up again potentially, but again, it's the question of, is that even the right solution? Chat and coordination and things like that. So trialed GitHub discussion. We've got the discords and all the questions that are going back on those, and all those get fed back to the team and into GitHub and then get shielded from work. I know as well, we've all foundation members have also taken huge chunks of our time to sort of maintain on the actual GitHub. So we're now down to just 30 odd PRs are open, and that's down more than half since when the foundation started. Clearing out things that are not needed, merging the things that were actually useful, and working hard on those that are remaining. Same with the issue backlog. We've got issues going back years, some which are relevant, and we ask everyone to help out with that. In case of, if you can replicate an issue, then comment and update it and highlight it so it needs to be fixed. and continue to work in this collaboration between you, the community, and us, the foundation, trying to progress things. We both want MonoGame to be successful. We want great games to be built on these things and have them built and published to all platforms that we can support, except not VR. I don't think we have any aspirations in VR because that's come up a few times, but we've not necessarily shied away from it. Although I have seen some members do VR with MonoGame. Brave souls.
It's definitely possible. I mean, wouldn't be bad to have a sample like that, but it's kind of low on the priority list, I think, just because, I don't know. Personally, I'm not a big believer in VR being the next big thing, but we'll see. It's not there yet, in my opinion, but I think having a sample for it would not be a bad thing.
Yeah. Certainly something, but again, limited time, limited resources. We have to focus on the things that make the most impact to the community and the foundation itself. So all of the native work, native platform work, that's all to re-energize the whole MonoGame framework, make it a lot easier, a lot more maintainable, and also a lot easier to support on some platforms. Now we're accessing native APIs to do all the things that we would originally do, shard wrappers or dependency, as well as trying to reduce our dependency wayload because we have too many, and those are they're hard to update, tricky to maintain, and the bindings between
right. Yeah, I mean, the big problem that I always felt with that was that we had too many. The problem is that every time we had to add some native support, we were always looking for some C# wrapper to that native support or having to write our own. And that meant that every single one had a different method that it worked. Some of them already had a wrapper like SharpDX and it worked a certain way. And others, like OpenGL, we had to write our own wrapper essentially because we originally had OpenTK way back in the day that we used for a long time. And it would just be a hodgepodge of wrappers. So we'd end up with, a MonoGame C# DLL, and then we'd have an OpenTK DLL, and then another DLL, and another DLL, then another native DLL, and then another managed DLL. So we'd end up having this folder full of DLLs of different libraries and things, which every time somebody tried to deploy a game somewhere, there'd always be some problem with something. And you'd end up like, well, what dependency is broken? We don't know which one it is. It's too complicated. So you'd end up with this mess. So by switching to having native backend, we have one native wrapper that communicates that we control. It communicates from C# to C++. And at the C++ level, we can statically link everything we possibly need into one big assembly or one big native DLL that has everything that's possibly needed, that keeps everything clean, separated. There's then just one C# DLL, one native DLL. In general, it doesn't have to be that way, but ideally we maintain that, keeping our dependencies down, making it a much simpler package, less things that can go wrong, essentially. And we have a little bit more control. It's, when we get to the native level, it unlocks almost every library. It also gains us some performance. Like for a long time, we've been using these, I guess, recreated versions of things like STB Sharp, which does image reading and writing, and we've been using a C# version that is a version generated by a source code generator that reads the C code and generates C# code, and that's worked fine, but the performance is not as good as the original C++ code or C code. So actually calling the native library, letting it do it and come back will improve our performance, and it's simpler. There's not this intermediate stage. There's not this extra maintenance. All those things I think are benefits, and it'll help us across all the platforms. We'll be able to share more code on consoles with what we have in the public repository. So I think there's a lot of benefits to this. It'll also let us pivot faster. When a new platform appears, it'll be easier to integrate than in the past, where it's like, well, great, here's a new platform. Is there a C# wrapper for this new API that we don't have? So I believe those will be all positives from this changeover.
And we're constantly growing and moving forward. So I think most of the activity in chat is going on in chat. I think.
Got some more. Yeah, more questions. There's one from Square Bananas here. What can the community do to help with the push towards 4.0? What can they do? Because obviously we're doing the native backend kind of stuff, but we need to kind of coordinate our efforts. So where would it be best for the community to focus their efforts? Should it be in adding unit tests or examples or tutorials? Or say getting the desktop VK thing working on Mac and Linux? Are those things that the community should be focusing on?
Oh, to me, yes, one of the key things is going to be support for desktop VK and the Windows DirectX 12 backends. So these two are, so the desktop VK is already merged, but it currently doesn't have a distribution model. So like you said, it's not building for macOS, it's not building for Linux. We had to make it building for those platforms and distributing it. So that's one thing. So I guess I've opened an issue in that regard to just plan shipping and distributing this VK.
Mm-hmm.
And we are likely going to have the same for Windows DirectX 12, except it's going to be maybe simpler because it's going to just need to build on Windows, most obviously. And we are going to need these two backends to be tested thoroughly, and not just unit tests. So they, of course, need to be running the unit tests, but we also need them to be tested against real-world projects and not just samples. So if any of community members have running projects going on, so just trying to make them run with the desktop VK and the upcoming Windows DirectX 12 backend, and checking if everything works, like changing resolutions, inputs, sounds, and any kind of window manipulation and so on, and just checking if it works without glitches and so on, and just on par with the previous backend, OpenGL and DirectX 10. And once everything of this is stable, I guess it's pretty much cool because it's really the pavement for everything to come with MonoGame. So to me, it's one of the key things into moving forward.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
You actually just sorry, Tom. You actually just reminded me that was one of the other big things that we've done in like the last 6 months, and that's re-enabled the unit tests on PRs and stuff. And we hadn't had unit tests running for a long time at this point. So yeah, they're all back and running, thankfully.
That's a huge step forward. So yeah, I guess from my perspective, yes, testing the Vulkan backend would be good time spent, against your own projects and stuff, and reporting bugs against it. That will help. Currently, the biggest thing with the Vulkan backend is there's no audio implementation in that native backend at the moment. We kind of left it open. We were going to open up a bounty specifically about integrating a new audio backend. The plan is to go ahead and adopt FNA's F-Audio as an audio backend for basically GL platforms, or most platforms that are not Windows, at least, and maybe even on Windows as well. But it was mostly about, because we're XNA compatible, we're still trying to maintain XACT support, even though XACT is not super popular. We're trying to maintain that. FNA has an XACT support that was based off the original MonoGame support, but improved, and they've done a native version of it, essentially, that has some better compatibility than the one that we have. So it'd be good to push in the same direction with that, especially since there really isn't any other open source alternative to something like XACT other than, our paid source, options like Fmod, and I guess Wise also has something. So the idea was to adopt F-Audio as an audio backend, for at least PC, and integrate that as an audio implementation under the new native backend. Not at the not through the C# API, but through the native API. And that's something that needs to happen before we have a full VK backend that has audio and and video. It currently just has windowing input and the graphics. It needs the audio backend before that's really a full package. So that's probably the next big bounty that we probably have to do. And then, which shouldn't take very long, I don't believe. But the trick here is how do we do it and be able to use the exact functionality on other platforms, but still use the like how do we use a native console API for audio, but still use the exact implementation from F Audio. So we need to figure out how we're going to do all that and make it work. The other option is just not to worry about it and just use it for low-level audio and don't worry about the exact compatibility. Again, that only affects a very small percentage of people. That exact tool is super old and it works. And I know big projects that use it. Stardew Valley still uses exact. And those projects, work around limitations and issues with it. But it's something that if we want to support fully and be the most accurate, that's probably what we need to do. So we just need to figure out how we want to approach that. And we should be doing that here soon. But from the community's perspective, just testing that Vulkan works and that your rendering bugs or your rendering works properly and you don't have bugs. If we have bugs, then we need to, have unit tests for those bugs, run the unit tests, verify that the Vulkan path works in those cases. We could hook up Vulkan to the unit tests. I mean, I was running it. It does work. There are probably some bugs in there that need to be addressed, and addressing some of those bugs in the unit tests under Vulkan would be good. So yeah, that's where I think the community can help right now to push things forward on 4.0. Other than that, it's just ship your games. The more MonoGame titles that are out there that use MonoGame that are impressive that people like, the more people get interested in using MonoGame for projects. And that helps the overall community when that happens.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. There are two questions here. I'm going to answer them both at the same time. One was asking about docs for consoles, like GDKX. Just to let you know that all the console documentation, what we're planning to do, we've done this with the Switch already, is put the documentation in the same repo on how you get started. So there won't be any public documentation from what I know, but it will all be once you gain access to the various repositories, once you've got your developer kits and everything, the documentation on how to use it will be in there. So that will be handled. There's another question about any plans to expand donation channels beyond Patreon. The answer is yes. We're waiting for Dom to finish off the sign up for GitHub sponsors. So that will be another option. And I'm not entirely sure if he was looking at doing some direct donations or not. I can't remember if that was something we discussed in one of the board meetings. But yeah, we want to open up more channels, preferably. Hopefully ones that don't take quite as much money off us in the process of. I can't remember. I don't know what the Patreon cut is, but it's not a little amount.
No, it's not a little amount, unfortunately. Yeah, so two things there. The console documentation, there'll never be any public console documentation. We cannot share any private information about how the consoles work or anything. What we have talked about doing is in our public documentation, mention these are the sorts of things you should do in order to prepare for console. What things are good practices, what are good habits, so that you're aware of things that might trip you up on console. The other thing is I'm posting this link here. We did post a couple, I guess a month back or so. We posted a link in the public docs about how to get access to the console repos. But the short of it is you only get access to the console repos if you're an official console developer. We do link to like how you apply to become a console developer for these different platforms. And then once you apply, we also link how do you request it. Once you're an official console developer, how do you request access to MonoGame for those platforms? All that stuff's strictly controlled. No one gets access unless they're an official developer. And once you do get access, there are, private channels to communicate with other console developers using using MonoGame, as well as just access to general development on those platforms. So that's basically the most that we can really provide, because everything else is pretty private. And as far as other methods of donation, we're looking into it, because yes, Patreon does take a pretty good cut, and I just like that.
Yeah. There's another question about the shader support. Any plans to upgrade that? I can answer that one. Yes, we've been in discussions about putting out a bounty to upgrade our shader compiler to something a little bit more modern. I've started the process of writing that up, but unfortunately, I need Tom's input on that, because he knows more about shaders than I do. But we want to get that up as soon as we can.
Yeah, that's a complicated subject, because it's something that has to be coordinated across all the platforms. We want to have, you kind of have to know, how do you deal with it on mobile, on PC, on Mac Linux? How do you deal with it on Xbox and Switch and PS4 and PS5? And it's a complicated subject. Since we originally did this work way, like, really, really early, when I started contributing to MonoGame, we were still in this process of how do we deal with shaders and OpenGL versus DirectX, and stuff like that. For a while, we had both OpenGL shaders and DirectX shaders available in MonoGame before we kind of went towards a cross-compile concept where we feed HLSL into Mojo shader and spit out GL code. And since then, the industry's kind of moved that direction. Like, if you're writing shaders for Unity, or for Unreal, or any other platform, you're kind of writing one shader language, and then under the hood, it is converting it to other languages and converting it for each platform. And that's kind of the same model that we've always followed, but we need to modernize it. So we're going to continue down supporting the HLSL path, because that's very XNA. It gives us a good basis to cross-compile to every other platform. For the most part, every platform has tools to get from HLSL to whatever native language it needs. So I think that's our right path. But we need to kind of coordinate it all, and we need, like, ideally one path that makes it easy, so that whenever we get to new platforms, we can easily plug in the new platform and not have to rewrite all the front end, to support this new platform. And there are some things that I've noticed that, can go away, really, and we should discuss it. Things like shader models can sort of kind of go away. Like, really, like, it used to be a thing where we want you to compile this shader on shader model 1 because it's more efficient than if you compile it for shader model 2 or 3. It's like, that's all gone. For the most part, you compile the shaders at the highest shader model available for that platform. It's only when you require a higher shader model because it has a feature that's not on the lower shader model. But even that's kind of going away, where almost every platform has access to every feature, because shaders are getting pretty advanced at this point. So there's a question about how to modernize some of that stuff, how to make it, how to maintain things where you can still pull in an old XNA shader and it automatically work, but and have it automatically function, but still be able to put in a modern shader and have it work. Ideally, you should be able to go to anywhere and cut and paste HLSL code and pretty much have it function correctly. So it's complicated to make that all work across all the platforms, and it takes people working on the public side that understand what the limitations are on the private console side, and how to deal with mobile and stuff to be able to do that appropriately. So, it's a big subject. It hasn't been a huge priority because, for the most part, MonoGame's been treated as a 2D engine. You need a pixel shader, you need a vertex shader, you don't need pretty much anything else. And for that reason, it hasn't been a priority to add more stages. We're in a good place to add more stages, but we also need to do it in a more complicated, in a manner that works across all the platforms. So that's going to be a big push moving forward. I want to get all the consoles stood up on the new APIs first. And then once the consoles move over to the new APIs, then we can start looking at adding new shader model features and rewriting the shader model. And some of that also have something to do with updating the pipeline itself. Now that we have this new native API in the back end, we probably also want to use a native API for the pipeline itself, for the content pipeline itself and all the tools, so that we don't have the same problem there where if you install one of our tools, there's like a million DLLs and files to do with it because we're piecing together all these disparate systems. We could limit, and that's the same of every, if you ever, looked at an Unreal install, there's a million DLLs as well. But we could clean that up more and have a more streamlined API that's shared there so that we can implement console tools very easily in the back end compared to how we do now. So yeah, the plan is to do all that stuff. We just have to get past this first hump, essentially.
Yeah, and obviously, for those asking about documentation, I think Simon would agree that documentation is going to be an ongoing process, and we'll always try and address the holes in our documentation. Shader is going to be one of those. So that's going to be an ongoing process. That said, if you feel this is one of the areas where community can really help out, if you feel that you've got a piece of knowledge and you know how something works, feel free to submit a piece of documentation for it. One of the ways we improve is by learning from each other. So if you have some knowledge, share it with people if you can. Share it with the community. We're willing to take on any tutorials that will help us move forward. Have we got more questions, Simon? Have you been keeping an eye on it?
I've been keeping an eye, but we are close to actually we're well past the hour now, so we're running out of not necessarily steam. I think we've got enough talk for another several hours, but we've got to save something for next month. I'm probably going to guess next month we might want to talk about the content pipeline improvement. Hot topic, but we'll save that. So, say thanks to everyone. I think the whole team have had fun and fun engaging and actually talking to everyone and getting all the feedback and having all the questions come through. We're always open. We're always accessible for talking. Preferably, either there's a GitHub issue so we can track the conversations, see how it's going through, or you can ping people on Discord. Although, obviously, a lot of our times focus either on our day jobs or trying to donate whatever free time we have into the foundation. So, checks and balances, as it were, how we're going to direct things. But we've always got one of the team has always got an ear on the community. We're always talking amongst ourselves about what we're going to do. But ultimately, to make MonoGame the best it could be for the community of building games. Full disclosure, it also helps us because we build projects and games in MonoGame, and Tom does lots of Tom also do lots of ports to and from. So all your main funding and work comes from getting things running one way or the other, which is always a. So, any one of the foundation members want to drop us a sign off, or I think we can draw these things to a close.
Thanks everyone for turning up.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is pretty cool. Thank you for being there.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. This has been recorded, I think, so we'll probably get that up on one of our channels at some point in the coming week or so, and we'll make an announcement about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's revive the YouTube channel.
Now there's an idea. I could stream to them using OBS to record sessions, so we can stream to them. We'll keep that in mind. We'll try for next month.
Next time,
definitely.
Yeah, we haven't done a MonoGame live for like 10 years.
It can't be 10 years, but yeah.
Don't look, Tom. You'll feel old.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think I look the same.
Oh, just take me back to the session you and Andy did back with Microsoft today. Oh, that was a fun.
Oh gosh. Oh yeah.
Those videos still exist somewhere. Your bid was still strong.
Do. Yeah, I guess so. Maybe a little grayer.
Okay, so thanks everyone, and we're signing off.
All right, thanks everybody.
Bye everybody.
Bye.
All right.